My friend I met in group therapy just confessed her feelings to me, and it what to do. So, I just recently started group therapy last month because my mental health had been spiraling out of control. It wasn't a sudden thing, more like a slow, painful unraveling that had finally reached its breaking point. Days felt heavier, nights stretched endlessly, and I couldn't find a way to feel normal anymore. My one-on-one therapist suggested it after I kept shutting down during our sessions, unable to articulate what I was going through. He said group therapy might help me see I wasn't alone, that hearing others share their struggles could ease the weight on my chest. I wasn't sold on the idea, though. The thought of sitting in a room with strangers and bearing my soul felt like a nightmare. What if they judged me? What if my problems seemed trivial compared to theirs? And, honestly, what if they were just weird? I kept making excuses to postpone attending. Next week, I'd tell myself, I'll give it a try next week. But the weeks turned into months, and my therapist's gentle encouragement turned into a firm nudge. Eventually, I ran out of reasons to avoid it, and with my anxiety clawing at me, I decided to go. The first session was strange. The room was smaller than I expected, with a circle of mismatched chairs and an odd assortment of people. There were older folks, middle-aged ones, and even a teenager who seemed more interested in his phone than in being there. I couldn't help but feel out of place. Was I too young? Too broken? My thoughts spiraled, and I almost turned around and walked out. But then, she walked in. Her presence was the first thing that caught my attention, not in a dramatic, movie-esque way, but there was something grounded about her. She wasn't trying to hide herself the way I was. She greeted everyone with a warm smile and settled into a chair with this air of quiet confidence. When the facilitator asked us to introduce ourselves, she spoke with a calm, open demeanor that made me feel a little less on edge. "Hi, I'm Sarah," she said, her voice steady, "and I'm here because, well, life's been throwing curveballs, and I'm trying to figure out how to hit back." I didn't say much that day, only the bare minimum to satisfy the facilitator, but when the session ended, Sarah approached me. "Hey," she said, holding out her hand, "you're new, right?" "I'm Sarah. Welcome to the chaos." I managed an awkward smile and shook her hand. "Yeah, thanks. I'm, still figuring this out." "Don't worry," she said, her tone light but reassuring. "None of us have it figured out. That's why we're here, right?" From that point on, we started talking after every session. It wasn't forced or awkward, just easy. We discovered we had a lot in common, too much, almost. Video games were our main shared interest. We could go on for hours debating the best RPGs, favorite character arcs, and strategies for boss fights. She even introduced me to a couple of games I hadn't played yet, and I found myself looking forward to our chats more than the therapy sessions themselves. It wasn't just about the games, though. Sarah had this way of making you feel like your thoughts mattered. She listened, really listened, and always had something thoughtful to say. She didn't sugarcoat her own struggles, either. She was raw and real about her journey, about the therapy that didn't work, the mistakes she'd made, and the things she still struggled with. It made me feel less alone, like maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. Week by week, therapy became less of a chore and more of a lifeline, largely because of her. There was something about the way she carried herself, a mix of vulnerability and strength, that I admired. She had this quiet resilience, like someone who'd been through hell and back but hadn't let it break her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I could find that strength too. By the time a month had passed, Sarah and I had settled into a rhythm. We'd chat after group therapy, sometimes exchanging a few jokes during the sessions when things got too heavy. She had a sharp sense of humor, the kind that could lighten even the darkest moments. It felt like I'd found an anchor in a storm, someone who understood what it was like to feel untethered but was trying to find their way back to solid ground. Looking back, I realize how much those small moments mattered. The first time she asked me about my favorite game. The way she laughed at one of my awkward jokes when no one else did. How she remembered things I said and brought them up later, making me feel seen. It was like, in this sea of strangers, she'd decided I was worth connecting with. And for someone like me, someone who often felt invisible, that meant everything. Today started like any other therapy day, a mix of nervous anticipation and a strange sort of comfort that had started to grow over the past month. Group therapy had become a regular part of my life, and while it was far from a cure-all, it felt like a space where I could breathe, even if just a little. Sarah was there, of course. She always was, with that same steady presence and warm smile. But something about her felt different today. At first, I thought it was just me overanalyzing, which I tend to do. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was projecting. But as the session went on, I couldn't shake the feeling. She was laughing at my jokes more than usual, not just a polite chuckle, but genuine, bubbling laughter that lit up her face. And these weren't even my best jokes, either. They were the throwaway comments, the awkward, offhand remarks I made when I felt too nervous to stay quiet. But to her, they seemed hilarious. It caught me off guard. Her attention wasn't something new, we'd always gravitated toward each other. But today, it felt different. There was a warmth in the way she looked at me, a brightness in her eyes that wasn't there before. When I spoke, she seemed fully tuned in, like the rest of the room didn't exist. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence. Maybe she was just having a good day. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But the way she smiled at me, the way she leaned in when I talked, it felt personal in a way I couldn't ignore. Then came the piece of paper. It was near the end of the session, after the facilitator had given us our weekly wrap-up and everyone was starting to gather their things. Sarah caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small, almost shy smile. As we walked out, she lingered a bit longer than usual, letting the others file out first. That's when she slipped it to me, a small, folded square of paper. I blinked, caught off guard, but took it without thinking. "What's this?" I asked, my voice laced with curiosity and a hint of nervousness. "Just something I wanted to ask you," she said, her tone light but her cheeks slightly flushed. Before I could say anything else, she gave a little wave and walked off, leaving me standing there, holding the note like it was some kind of secret treasure. I unfolded it as soon as I got to my car. Her handwriting was neat, deliberate, and it felt strange to see something so personal. The note was short, simple. "Would you feel comfortable exchanging numbers?" Beneath it was a smiley face that somehow felt like the punctuation to an unspoken question. I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't a big deal, right? People exchange numbers all the time. But this felt loaded. Still, I couldn't deny that I felt comfortable around her, more comfortable than I had with anyone in a long time. So, I took out my phone and texted her my number. Almost instantly, my phone buzzed with her reply, "Thanks." Smiley face. What followed was a short back and forth, nothing too deep, but enough to feel like the conversation wasn't over. We talked about the session, a new game she'd started playing, and some random memes she sent my way. It was casual, easy, like the conversations we always had after therapy, but now it extended beyond the confines of the group. It felt nice, but also strange. I wasn't used to someone taking this much of an interest in me. Later that evening, as I was scrolling through my messages, my phone lit up with an incoming call. It was Sarah. My heart skipped a beat, not because I was nervous, but because it was unexpected. We'd just been texting. What could she need to say that couldn't wait? "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed a hint of surprise. "Hey," she replied, her tone soft, almost hesitant. There was a pause, the kind that stretched just long enough to make me wonder what was coming next. I needed to tell you something." I felt a flicker of unease. Her voice had that tone people use when they're about to say something serious, something that can't be taken back. "Okay," I said slowly. "What's up?" Another pause. Then, she took a deep breath. "I don't know how to say this without it sounding weird, but I think I have a crush on you." Her words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, unexpected, disorienting. I didn't know what to say. My mind scrambled for a response, but all I could manage was a stunned, "Oh." "I know it's a lot," she added quickly, her words tumbling out like she was afraid of the silence. "And I'm not trying to make things awkward or anything. I wanted to be honest with you. You're such a good person, and I really enjoy talking to you. But if this is too much or if you don't feel the same, I completely understand." Her honesty was admirable, but it left me reeling. I hadn't seen this coming, not really. I'd noticed the extra attention, the way she laughed at my jokes, but I hadn't connected the dots. And now, here it was, laid bare in front of me, and I didn't know how to feel. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. I need some time to think about this. It's not that I don't appreciate it, I do. I wasn't expecting it." "Of course," she said, her tone understanding but tinged with nervousness. "Take all the time you need. I don't want to pressure you. I just thought you should know." When we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, my mind racing. The situation felt complicated, more complicated than I wanted it to be. Part of me was flattered. Another part was confused. And then there was the nagging voice in the back of my head, reminding me of the 10-year age gap, the fact that we'd met in a therapy group, and the overwhelming uncertainty of it all. The call left me feeling like I'd been thrown into some kind of emotional limbo. After Sarah's confession, I didn't know what to think or how to feel. On the one hand, I couldn't deny how much I enjoyed her company. She'd been a constant source of positivity in my life at a time when I was drowning in negativity. On the other hand, the age gap loomed large in my mind, like a barrier I wasn't sure I could or should cross. I sat in my room for a while, the silence broken only by the faint hum of my fan. My phone lay on the bed next to me, screen dimmed, her name still at the top of my recent calls. I couldn't shake the awkwardness of the whole situation. She liked me. And that wasn't something I'd anticipated. It felt surreal, almost like a subplot in a story that didn't belong in mine. But it was real, and now I had to figure out what to do about it. The timing made everything feel even messy. Just earlier that day, I'd been sitting in my one-on-one session with my therapist, venting about my ex. She'd reached out again, asking if we could give things another shot, our third attempt at salvaging something that had already fallen apart twice before. Part of me wanted to say yes, to cling to the familiarity of it all, but my therapist had been blunt. "I think you already know the answer," he'd said, his tone kind but firm. "You're not in the right headspace to revisit that relationship. It didn't work for a reason." He wasn't wrong. My ex and I had a history that was as complicated as it was painful. We'd tried to make it work before, but each time it ended the same way: miscommunication, unmet expectations, and a mutual inability to meet each other where we were. Deep down, I knew getting back together wasn't the solution, but it was hard to let go of something that had once felt so important. And now, on the very same day, Sarah had confessed her feelings. It was like the universe was throwing me into a storm of decisions I didn't feel ready to make. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. What did I want? Could I even trust my feelings right now, when my mental health was still so fragile? Was I overthinking the age gap, or was it a valid concern? And most importantly, what kind of relationship, if any, did I want with Sarah? I decided the best thing to do was to bring it up with my therapist. He'd always been someone I could trust, someone who didn't just listen but also helped me untangle the knots in my mind. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. The next session couldn't come fast enough. When the day finally arrived, I walked into his office feeling more conflicted than ever. He greeted me with his usual calm demeanor, his presence instantly making me feel a little less overwhelmed. We started with the usual check-in, how my week had been, what was on my mind, but it didn't take long for the topic to shift to Sarah. "I need your advice," I said, my voice quieter than usual. "Something happened, and I don't know how to handle it." He leaned forward slightly, his expression attentive. "Go on." I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put it into words. "So, there's this woman in my group therapy. We've gotten pretty close just as friends, but the other night, she told me she has feelings for me. Like, romantic feelings." He didn't say anything at first, just nodded for me to continue. "And, there's an age gap," I added. "She's 30. I'm 20. It's not a huge deal, I guess, but it feels off. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me overthinking, but it's been messing with my head. And, well, on top of that, I've got my ex reaching out again, wanting to get back together. It's just a lot." He let out a thoughtful hum, his brow furrowing slightly. "That is a lot to process. How do you feel about her confession? Did it catch you off guard?" "Completely," I admitted. "I mean, I kind of noticed she was acting different, laughing at my jokes more, paying extra attention to me, but I didn't think it meant this. I like her, don't get me wrong. She's great. But I don't know if I like her that way. And even if I did, would it even be a good idea? We're in therapy, for crying out loud. Isn't that complicated?" "It certainly adds a layer of complexity," he agreed. "Relationships that begin in therapeutic settings can come with unique challenges, especially when both individuals are in the process of healing. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's doomed. What's more important is understanding your own feelings and boundaries. Have you thought about what you want, independent of her feelings or your ex's proposal?" That question hit me like a brick. What did I want? I'd been so consumed with trying to navigate other people's emotions that I hadn't stopped to consider my own. Did I want to explore something with Sarah? Or was I clinging to her attention because it felt good in the moment? And as for my ex, was I even capable of rebuilding a relationship that had already failed twice? "I don't know," I said finally, my voice tinged with frustration. "I guess I just don't want to mess things up. I don't want to hurt her, but I also don't want to lead her on if I'm not sure. And with my ex, it's like, I know it's not a good idea, but part of me keeps thinking, what if this time is different? It's exhausting." He gave me a small, understanding smile. "It sounds like you are trying to juggle a lot of emotions at once, which is completely understandable. You're in a transitional phase of your life, trying to figure out who you are and what you want. It's okay to take your time. You don't have to make a decision right now. What's important is being honest with yourself and with others." His words stuck with me long after the session ended. I realized I'd been putting so much pressure on myself to have all the answers, to make the right choice, that I'd forgotten it was okay to take things slow. Relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or something in between, are messy, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. As I walked out of his office, I felt a small sense of relief. I didn't have to figure everything out right away. For now, I could focus on taking things one step at a time, listening to my own feelings, and seeing where they led me. Over the next week, I found myself thinking about Sarah more than I wanted to admit. Not just about her confession, but about her as a person, the way she always knew how to make people feel heard, the way she laughed at the smallest things, and the way she seemed to bring a sense of calm into the chaos of group therapy. I tried to separate my feelings from the situation, but it wasn't easy. Every time I thought I had a clear answer, new doubts crept in. The age gap was still a factor I couldn't entirely shake. Objectively, 10 years wasn't that big of a deal. Plenty of couples had bigger gaps. But I wasn't just any 20-year-old. And she wasn't just any 30-year-old. We'd met in a setting where we were both vulnerable, where the walls we built around ourselves had started to crack. That alone made things complicated. Was it fair to either of us to even entertain the idea of a relationship when we were both still trying to figure ourselves out? At the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that she made me feel safe. And that wasn't something I came across often. Her presence had become a bright spot in my week, a reminder that connection was still possible, even in the darkest times. I didn't want to lose that. But was I ready to take it to the next level? And if I did, would it ruin everything? When the next therapy session rolled around, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. I wasn't sure how things would feel between us now that her confession was out in the open. Would it be awkward? Would she regret telling me? Or would things somehow feel normal? As I walked into the room, I spotted her right away. She gave me a small, tentative smile, one that seemed to say, "No pressure, but I'm here." I smiled back, hoping it conveyed the same. We didn't get a chance to talk much during the session, partly because the topic was heavier than usual, and partly because I was still trying to sort through my own thoughts. But when it ended, she lingered near the door, waiting for me. "Hey," she said softly as I approached. "How've you been?" "Good," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. "How about you?" "Same," she replied, though her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. I didn't mean to put you on the spot last week. I hope I didn't make things weird." "You didn't," I said quickly, wanting to reassure her. "I'm glad you told me. It's just a lot to think about, you know." She nodded, her expression understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I don't want to rush you or make you feel pressured." We stood there for a moment, the air between us charged but not uncomfortable. I realized then that what I appreciated most about Sarah wasn't just her honesty but her patience. She wasn't demanding an answer or trying to force anything. She was giving me space to figure things out, and that meant more to me than she probably realized. "I've been talking to my therapist about it," I admitted, surprising even myself. "He thinks it's okay to take things slow, to focus on what I'm feeling instead of what I think I should do." "That sounds like good advice," she said, her smile softening. "And for what it's worth, I don't want you to do anything you are not comfortable with. If staying friends is what feels right to you, then that's okay. I needed you to know how I felt." Hearing her say that lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. "Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new kind of normal. We still talked after therapy, still texted occasionally, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. She didn't push, and I didn't pull away. It gave me the space I needed to reflect on what I wanted, not just from her but from myself. In the end, I realized that I wasn't ready for a relationship, not with Sarah, not with my ex, not with anyone. I was still figuring out who I was, still navigating the messiness of my mental health. Jumping into something new, especially with someone I cared about, felt like a risk I wasn't ready to take. But that didn't mean I wanted to lose Sarah. If anything, I valued her friendship more than ever. The next time we talked after therapy, I decided to be honest with her. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," I began, my voice steady but nervous. "And I want you to know how much I appreciate you being upfront with me. It means a lot. But I don't think I'm in a place where I can give you what you're looking for right now. I still have a lot to figure out, and I don't want to rush into anything and mess things up." Her expression didn't falter, though I could see the flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "I understand," she said, her tone genuine. "I really do. And I hope you know that this doesn't change how much I value our friendship. You've been such a bright spot in my life, and I don't want to lose that." "Me neither," I said, relieved beyond words. I still want us to be friends if that's okay with you." "Of course," she said, smiling. "Friends sounds perfect." And it did. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was making a decision that wasn't driven by fear or obligation, but by what was right for me. Sarah and I continued to support each other in therapy, our friendship growing stronger with each passing week. And while the question of what if lingered in the back of my mind, I knew I'd made the right choice for now.